Department of Budget and Management Undersecretary and Chief Information Officer and Information and Communications Technology Group Head, Ms. Maria Francesca Del Rosario.
How much time do
Joining them is Private Sector Advisory Council on Digital Representative and City Savings Bank Head of Legal and Data Protection Officer for Private Sector Infrastructure, Attorney Ernesto Herrera. Good morning, sir. I'd also like to invite on stage Microsoft Philippines National Technology and Security Officer, Mr. Dale Jose. And completing our panelists is Aboiti's Chief Operating Officer for Smart Cities, Mr. Alvin Nam. And of course, we have our panel moderator, KPMG in the Philippines, Vice Chairman and Chief Operating Officer and Head of Advisory, Mr. Noel Bonoan. Please take it away.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for joining us on this panel. To my esteemed guests, this particular topic of digital government is very close to my heart, having straddled both my careers in both the public and private sector. So let's dive in. We have 50 minutes, and let's make the full use of it. Attorney Nino, you're the Executive Director of the Private Sector Advisory Council, and this is the Private Sector Advisory Council to the President, President Marcos. Just recently, there has been a very interesting and important development in government digitalization. This is with the passage and the signing by the President of Executive Order number 32. Maybe to set the tone, you can tell us what this Executive Order number 32 is all about.
Thank you, Noel, and good morning. For the President signed Executive Order number 32, which is to streamline the permit processing for telecommunication and internet infrastructure. So what this does is it reduces application turnaround time, permit requirements. So previously, permit turnaround is around 2.5 years, and with this passage, it's going to go down to 2.5 months.
This is a permit application for what particular permit?
Telecommunication internet infrastructure. Okay. So this will actually fast track digital infrastructure development in the country.
So when you talk about digital infrastructure and telecoms infrastructure, you're talking about cell site towers and all that. And that is a big issue because a lot of the cell site towers development is actually slowed down by the permitting process, right?
That's correct. Yes, it actually enhances bureaucratic efficiency by reducing all the red tape. It streamlines processes across all government agencies, including LGUs. No. And I would like to commend QC for actually spearheading. One of the main features of the executive order is providing a one-stop shop for construction permit applications. So this is a very good development. It will spur digital infrastructure development in the country, and as we all know, internet and telecommunication infrastructure is very crucial in the development of smart cities.
So, with this, with the sign of the EO, how does that bind local government?
So the executive order, as we all know, it's practically a law. So it applies to national government agencies as well as local government units. So this executive order actually enjoins, with the force of the law, all government agencies and LGUs to comply with the requirements. So this is it has the enforcement power of a law.
And I suppose the end result of this is that we expect that at the local government level, there will be a wider capacity for, say, broadband services to be delivered to
That's
the
correct.
citizenry. And that's very important when it comes to data. So maybe let me just shift gears and go over to you, Alvin. Aboiti's data innovation. With this opportunity now of getting higher broadband speeds, a wider digital highway, how will that change the ability of governments as well as companies located in LGUs to have more, to have more access to data?
Right. Thanks, Noel. I think, once you have access to data, I think the critical part is, I think the first thing you want to think about is citizen engagement. The moment you create citizen delight, having eliminate friction, having to eliminate to drive efficiency. I think Quezon City has been a great blueprint and a playbook to think about how do you drive that much better, and that citizen engagement transform the way we think about how do we run smart cities of the future with the government. I think that's number one. Number two, it's all about resource allocation, right? The more data you have, the more broadband, the more connected you are within any city. Government now can make decisions much quicker, faster, but more importantly, in anything we do, it's a trade-off, right? We are limited by resources. So with data, how do you drive resource allocation much quicker, much faster? And I think what's more important about data is, the art of the possible. Data is the new oil. So the more you are connected, the more you have broadband, now it unlocks, incremental value of data that previously you have not seen. And I think this is where, having a better broadband, having a better infrastructure, you create that collective intelligence between the interaction between citizens, businesses, and the government. So you begin to accelerate the concept of digital government, digital citizen, and the digital economy.
You mentioned, and you hear this mantra so often that data is the new oil, but having data accessible just to anyone could pose dangers. No? So, and I suppose you know now where my next question will be. It really now matter. We're now really talking about security. So maybe I'll just shift to Dale, who is the NITSO of Microsoft Philippines. No? Digitization, while it brings so many benefits, it comes with a number of risks. Why, especially to data, in the form of DDoS attacks, ransomware, phishing, data theft, and the like. So what is the overall security profile of the Philippines currently? And assuming all these things happen where LGUs now have more access to data, have more capacity to host data, how is our present capacity able to, our present security capabilities able to handle those data risks?
Yeah, so it's very important. No? So digitalization is happening, and fundamental to that is cybersecurity and data privacy. Because ultimately, if you want to envision a smart city with thriving citizens, your citizens need to trust the systems and that their data are protected. So that's very crucial. Now, as far as the profile of the country today, so if you would, let's say, look at some of the statistics from Kaspersky, for example, last year, 2022, the Philippines, among the countries that have been or seeing the most cyber attacks in the world, we ranked second. Okay, so that's quite alarming. The second item would be um, we have a very low cyber talent pool worldwide. So according to various reports, 3.5 million jobs are unfulfilled worldwide. And we're part of that. No? So we have a low cyber talent pool. At the same time, we have very low pipeline of cybersecurity talent locally. No? So for example, in a report commissioned by the USAID last year, there were three key findings. The first one, in terms of the academic pipeline, we're supposed to be, producing more cybersecurity graduates. We have very small number of that. Another one is we need to have a military to civilian pipeline whereby you have, military personnel who have been trained on cybersecurity such that when they leave military service, they become civilians, they become part of, our cyber talent pool in civic society, but that one is close to non-existent. And the third one would be, if you talk about government doesn't have, that enough uh, uh, budget to really retain and recruit cybersecurity talent. The third item would be, so there is another statistics from the ITU whereby the Philippines rank 61st out of 194 countries as far as the ITU Global Cybersecurity Index. No? Now, if you would deep dive into the data relevant to the Philippines, one of the areas for improvement to us is organizational measure. And based on the report, it refers to, the ability or the quality of the national cybersecurity strategy and its implementation. So, probably some of you know that the ICT is currently crafting the new National Cybersecurity Strategy Plan of 2028. It's currently under draft, and they're doing their collaboration with the industry and the private sector to really make it more compelling for the nation.
Thanks for that. You mentioned budget earlier, so we do have the DBM Undersecretary here with us, and let me go now to financial issues. We're actually working on a couple of projects where we're helping local governments ramp up their capabilities to spend, sorry, not to spend, but to collect, particularly through the real property taxes. And there's a component of that which actually requires digitalization. And a lot of the chief executives we talk to are all, I think everyone's convinced, about what digitalization can bring, the benefits. There's no question about that. But it always comes down to how am I going to pay for this? So maybe um, from the DBM's point of view, uh, you might want to be able to suggest what are the different ways that local governments can fund their digitalization projects.
Yeah. So first and foremost, the Department of Budget Management provides local government support fund to the local government units. That's around 7 to 10 billion. It depends. It usually changes based on the fiscal space to the local government. No, so it's up to the LGUs to ask for funding from us. So they can do that digitally. So we have provide the local budget circular 150 for them to request digitalization project support fund. So second is LGU should be able to align with the Philippine Development Plan set forth by NEDA just this January. The number one priority of the administration is digitalization. So in terms of allocating your respective fiscal spaces, you have to align with that, and also correspondingly for the support fund that's coming from the national, we are also prioritizing that as well. Now, uh, going back to the concept of the funding itself, and in fact, during our last executive review board, we have allocated a lot of projects. We have approved a lot of digitalization budget proposals of the national government that will eventually be also servicing the local government units. So, for example, for DILG, for certain services that will be translated to the grassroots. And that's our roughly we tripled the budget that we have allocated prior for this year's national expenditure program
for
for
digitalization.
digitalization. And if I can pivot also, we're also talking about the right sizing. So it's actually the benchmark of our stepping stone to the right sizing, because we with the automation, with digital transformation, we'll be able to optimize the processes of the national government and also correspondingly with the local government, and this will reduce certain manual processes, and then we'll also be upskilling government employees for digital skills. The the Congress enacted earlier the digital work uh, workforce act, workforce competitiveness act, wherein government employees are now can be trained or upskilled for digitalization. And then we have for just to deconstruct the concept of smart cities. No, when we're doing budget reviews, for example, for proposals, um, we always take into consideration sustainability. So right now, like we're considering climate change for green sustainable. We're doing green procurement. We are revising our commonly used supplies in the PSDBM to include digital tools, no, that the local governments and the national government agencies will commonly use, right? Like example, the Zoom, Microsoft, anything cloud, anything that is usually used by the agencies. If I can pivot to that, we're also pushing um, for for network infrastructure to be used as commonly supplied, like servers, switches, modems, and so on. So those are the things that we're devising on the policy level from our side to ensure that we'll be able to comply or to align our initiatives with the PDP number one agenda of the administration. And with that, as Attorney you mentioned, EO 33 is very important for because it takes around 29 permits just to put up a single cell site. So right now we're yeah 29. Mind you, there's a lot. Um, and no matter how much we digitalize, no matter how much we provide electronic or digital platforms to our citizens, if they don't have internet in the rural areas, if they don't have connectivity in we call it GIDA, geographically isolated and depressed areas, we won't be able to provide them the proper service, public service that they deserve. So it's quite in conjunction with the initiative of the government as well to ramp up or provide the real-time services or social protection services that they deserve.
Well, okay, I've well, a couple of follow-up questions now. First, my question is that can a local government directly, because you said you're having a fund, can a local government go directly to the TBM, or is that going to be coursed through the, D, uh, the DILG for them to be able to access
They can go
that
directly to
budget?
DBM.
Okay,
There's a portal wherein the
okay.
budget officers or budget officers will know that they can contact us directly through that portal in DBM.
Okay. And secondly, you're saying that for them to be bumped up, I guess, in priority, it would be good for them to have ESG, the ESG components. I suppose you're following the SDG components. No?
Yes. In fact, coincidentally, there's another group from us that's in another hotel talking about exact same thing. So we call it a risk-based approach in budgeting, wherein we're considering certain factors, or let's say the area is prone to climate change risk elements, or any kind of prioritization that the citizen in the area would need. So we'd have to prioritize those citizens or those LGUs that would cater to certain group of people in the area. So we have that in our we call it in the assessment reviews of
Okay,
budget proposals.
great, great. You're taking notes, huh? Okay, so that was our project manager for the work we're doing with the BNPF. Okay, still on the topic of financing, uh, what is the role of multilaterals in this whole scenario? And I'd like to about financing. The work we're doing for BILGF, no, is actually in being funded through the ADB. But maybe our representative from USAID can talk about what the USAID also does in relation to its to digitalization efforts in the Philippines.
All right. So thank you, Noel. No? Well, USAID, we are part of the U.S. government. So we are the technical assistance and financial arm of the United States government. So we're present in most embassies that we are in around the world. No? In terms of financing, in sort of the Philippines is sort of in the upper low middle income status. We're almost there in the upper middle income. So for countries like us, I think the role of financing institutions, especially us, we don't provide loans and we don't do major infrastructure projects because all of the things that we do are mostly grants. So they're smaller in scale compared to ADB or the World Bank or JICA. For middle income countries, for those that are mature enough, I think what we're realizing is countries like the Philippines, there's a lot of liquidity. So government, of course, there's a fiscal crunch because of the pandemic, but I mean, compared to other countries, there's a lot of liquidity in the capital markets and government finances. So really, what we're seeing, the role of the increasing role of organizations like us, no, donors, no, is on technical assistance. And that's where we're stepping in. No? So we're not funding the big infrastructure projects, etc. So we're funding technical assistance. No? And that's really sometimes what national and local governments need. So for example, in this space, and USAID has 40 projects across different sectors. No? So in terms of digitalization, the smart sector, no, the cyber sector. No? So as mentioned earlier, no? So in terms of connectivity, no? Of course, if you want to digitize, you need the infrastructure, the bandwidth to begin with. No? So we're working on increasing connectivity, not just broadband, not just your usual cables or fiber cables. We're also working with the likes of Starlink, Pacific. No, we're trying to get more alternative forms of bandwidth connectivity. We just launched a project working with Farmers Cooperative, no, for example, in Butuan City, no, where we're working with Pacific. And that gives them broadband because, yes, you're right. On the one hand, you're streamlining telecom tower permits, but the cost-benefit analysis for far-flung areas, sometimes the alternatives are better. So, for example, satellite might be better instead of setting up telecom towers. So we're trying to diversify the available means for connecting. No? So that's one. No? And part of that project, it's called the Beacon Project, and you can approach me later if you want to collaborate with us in that project. No? We did that. IBM was the one that did that talent pool study. No? For cybersecurity, we are also trying to support government. In fact, we have different kinds of cybersecurity training programs for government, especially for government personnel. No? So it's all from basic cybersecurity all the way to the internationally recognized CISA certifications. So we're doing that as well. in terms of ease of doing business, and digitalization, streamlining, that's part and parcel of that. We're working closely with ARTA. Actually, the predecessor of that EO that streamlined the telecom tower permits, our project team actually supported ARTA, DILG, DICT, and other um, agencies in developing this memorandum circular during the pandemic that streamlined the telecom tower permitting process. No? And now we are thankful that it's more powerful because it's now an executive order. No? So these are things that we do. No? We provide technical assistance. We have embedded consultants. No? And at the subnational level, we also have been working. No? I used to be part of the contractor. I was an advisor in Batangas City. So the presentation of Administrator Mike resonated with me. We have been doing a lot of ease of doing business reforms at the subnational level. So really, and the important thing is digitize, interconnect all of the systems. No? And the way we sort of advert or market it to the citizens is if you digitize, for example, if you pay your business permits online, GCash fees are cheaper than traveling, no? Your time and cost of a jeepney. So for example, in Batangas City, where I was assigned before, no, sometimes if you live far away from the city center, you can do a 1 hour jeep ride versus just paying your business permits via GCash. And we were the first in Batangas City to enable mobile payments for business permits back in 2014. When GCash wasn't an app yet, it was like using the IMEI code or whatever you call it. So we're doing a lot of these streamlining digitalization work at the national level and at the subnational level. But again, going back to your question is, I think the role really for us, multilaterals, bilaterals, it's more on the value added for us, really, so the technical assistance. Because for me, I believe that the Philippines, both private and public, there's a lot of liquidity already. So and even KPMG, I think the value added there is how do you help them, because they have money in most cases, to set up all of these digital systems. It's how do they even start? So they need some guidance on that. So it's really TA. I think that's our role as USA.
Well, you've mentioned enabling, no? And a lot of these EOs are also enablers. Attorney Nino, there's another EO recently that came out, which could be relevant to this discussion. And that's EO 29. If
That's EO 29, and
maybe you can talk about it.
actually, USEC Sasa would be in a better position to discuss that. This is actually an initiative of the DBM, and the Private Sector Advisory Council actually supported that initiative and push it with Malacanang. So,
Well, you said you might want
Yeah,
to.
so EU29 is streamlining the public financial information system. So creating the integrated financial management information system across all national government agencies. Only, of course, with the GOCCs and LGUs, it on a limited manner, and in as much as the national is involved in their fiscal autonomy. So, and it actually mandates or it directs all NGEs to use a unified platform for us to have a centralized financial information system. So, in terms of for us for the DBM and for the DOF and for the COA, it streamlines all of the reports. So we're just only seeing single source of data. So we'll be able to properly know the performance of each agency with respect to how they are obligating their funds, how they're dispersing it, and ultimately providing a transparency portal for the citizens to see how their public funds are being used. Now, with the new technology tools, we are developing the integration using the application programming interface, robotics process automation, and a lot more of the tools that you can find out there. But ultimately, what we want all agencies to have to to do is to at the end of the day, all of their financial transactions, since these are public funds, are visible by the to the public. So it keeps everyone up to their toes. to provide that kind of accountability that the public deserves.
And I would imagine that that system would also give data analytics
Yes.
capabilities to the DBM.
Yes.
No?
In fact, we'll be presenting to Estonia that particular portal, which is correspondingly it's a project, digital imaging and monitoring and evaluation. So it's an M&E solution that's coming or deriving from the IFMIS. So the people will be able to know where are the farm to market roads, where are the trains that are being developed, the roads, so and then there's also a crowdsourcing facility wherein the public will be able to report whether these are really being implemented or being constructed in the first place. So for us in DBM, we'll be able to know how much more the funds we'll be able to provide to that particular project. So it's really more of that kind of monitoring and evaluation that we intend to do with that project. And we're presenting that to the Open Government Portal partnership in Estonia.
So that sounds really exciting, and it's a huge development. It's a big leap in transparency and governance, no? But when can we expect all this?
This year. It's actually the prototype is already up. So
Okay, Alvin, you might want to propose what other bells and whistles are there for a government system like this in terms of data innovation, and even incorporating, analytics, and even incorporating artificial intelligence, possibly.
Yeah, sure. I think, we've got to start somewhere. And I think the moment you kind of think about and inspire, whether the government, the LGUs, to kind of really think about harnessing data, I think you start with areas where it's the most concern for the LGUs, right? Which is economic investments. So the economic team within each LGU should start building that muscle, having that DNA of why data is important. Because if you want investments to come in, you want to attract, you need that data point to provide. And so the way we need to begin to look at new signals in every LGU, whether from satellite images to kind of look at illumination patterns of urbanization, to look at satellite patterns in terms of density, right? Or you look at social listening, right? Social media, how people are thinking about it within a city. Or you look at telecom data, mobile data. And I think each of these economic units within each LGU should start expanding rather than just looking at data from PSA. How do I begin to harness new signals that gives me not only the view of the hindsight, but creating that dynamic insight, that new signals that you're having. And now you begin to develop a new set of muscle to be able to have that strategic agility and that strategic foresight for the future. So I think that's kind of a low-hanging fruit where I think each LGU should start evolving and thinking about, said, why is data important and how do we harness data and unlock that value?
That's a good starting point.
Yeah.
And also, with respect to starting points, it would seem that a lot of, except for the certain LGUs like Makati, QC, Batangas, a lot of the LGUs, I would say, are still at maybe ground zero, ground one. No? And this would be also a good starting point for them to look at how to protect their data. So, what should we be doing, Dale? What should we be doing in terms of, or local governments or the national government be doing in terms of preparing, a cybersecurity playbook around prevention and response at this point?
Yeah. So, so the first one, as I mentioned earlier, DICT, they're building the National Cybersecurity Plan. So that's very critical, right? Because in that plan, there will be recommendations on policies and probably even new laws, like a Cybersecurity Act. That's very important because for LGUs, you need to be able to do not reinvent the wheel, right? So there are standards in place, like for example, USAID would, for example, suggest NIST frameworks, cybersecurity frameworks because it's accessible, easy to adapt. So standards should be there in terms of laws. For example, I'm aware that the government plans to propose a bill or an executive order for, minimum consistent security baselines for critical infrastructure. There should also be, a culture of us sharing cyber breaches. There should be a reporting obligation because cyber attacks are quite advanced, and for us to be able to keep pace, we need to be sharing data with each other. Skilling is very important. So a lot of programs, initiatives are being done between government, the private sector, civil society. And then the third point would be taking from the example of Quezon City, right? So they use cloud computing. And you can see this as very evident during the pandemic where, as many people would say, digital acceleration, digital transformation happened in just a matter of months versus 2 years, right? So take, for example, a lot of MSMEs who survived, they digitalized, right? We have the Supreme Court. Lockdown happened 2 months after they were able to switch from physical court hearings to virtual court hearings. That's the power of cloud. Now, cloud service providers like us is essential to us to, secure our systems. We need to earn customers' trust. So, so we have all of the technology, state-of-the-art technology, and the expertise to protect customer systems and data. So I would recommend LGUs, MSMEs to really consider cloud computing because once you are on cloud, the responsibility of securing and protecting your data is no longer your sole responsibility. It's a shared responsibility with the cloud service provider. And since we're on the topic of smart cities, when you think about cloud computing, there are other benefits apart from economics, cybersecurity. If you think about sustainability, cloud computing, a lot of organizations have already seen that cloud computing can be more carbon and energy efficient than on-premise options. And also think about future of innovation, right? We have 5G IoT coming, artificial intelligence. With the cloud, it's easier to, adopt all of these technologies without, spending too much on capex.
Interesting. We see though we always going back to the topic of finance, no, because you mentioned capex, but and this is for you, Yusek. No? I understand that well, as we go along, there will be always greater demands to improve technology because technology is, gets there's a matter of obsolescence. It gets obsolete very fast. No? And budgetary constraints have to keep up with that. Now, recently, the Garcia Mandanas ruling expanded, or not recently, this has been some years back, no? But only, I think, recently implemented. The Garcia Mandanas ruling of the Supreme Court expanded the tax base available to the local governments. No? But I also understand that that formula of how much they'll be getting is based on the past 3 years performance of the ERA, or the Internal Revenue Allotment Act. And now that we're coming into some, economic headwinds, I would expect that, the level of ERA will start going down. No? How is that going to affect the ability of local governments to finance a lot of their projects?
All right. So currently, we are still evaluating the Mandana. So the EO 138 has been up for review, no, by the administration, including DBM. So what we intend to have, what we have realized during our consultations is that even though there's on the Mandanas, the ability of the most LGUs to implement certain projects that they have been dependent to the national, they will still have to kind of outsource to the national government because they're not used to it. So there's a transition period that's going on. So determining whether which projects or the project activities and programs should be devolved to the LGUs. Now, going back to the digitalization, we are cognizant of that certain restriction or the inherent or essential factor of technology to to upskill itself or it's not static anyway. So on the policy level, at least on the government procurement policy board, which I'm the alternate chair of that, we are devising ways to streamline ICT procurement. So they don't have to be limited with, so we provide options as to how the LGUs would be able to procure certain tools, certain processes, or certain, let's say, whether it's CAPEX, MOE, our colleagues from Microsoft told us about the use of cloud. So that's usually MOE. So that's actually more, for me, more sustainable because even though the software will change, you'll still be able to avail of the upgrades or even the security features that they usually do in terms of patching and so on. So that's a more ideal scenario of ICT procurement in terms of the LGU. So what I think we can do on the JPPB and the DBM levels on the policy where there has to ease up the procurement process or in terms of getting the right tools that they need. Also more we're just yesterday we also we met with the DICT on the National Cybersecurity Plan wherein there's a need to delineate the critical infrastructure because securing critical infra is different from securing the citizens. So, so the perspective in terms of cybersecurity, and that would also be translated into the LGU because for the LGU, it's a different thing for you to look at the cybersecurity of your critical infra, meaning your internet services, your network infrastructure, your IoT, with your 5G if you have, vis-a-vis securing your citizens, because that's you're looking at differently. So there has to be that kind of guidelines or guidance in terms of how do we properly cascade certain policies on the ground. So with the question on the mandanas, it's still I still up for finalization. So it's also a determination of the national government agencies and the LGUs as to how they would have to how much is the control of the national government with respect to digitalization. But nonetheless, in terms of policies, in terms of the DICT providing guidance to the LGUs, I think they're on the right track, like providing DICT providing proper framework, what tools you have to procure, what kind of security in terms of API you should be looking at, and so on and so forth.
What about public-private partnerships? Is this one method that, say, the LGUs can, can go with to finance their IT operations?
Yes, it's one means to fund those operations, no. But we also sit in the EO 170 technical working group. So EO 170 is the executive order that mandates the use of digital platforms for collection, payments, disbursement, and so on. So what the issue on the EO 170 with respect to the LGUs is the collection fees. So these are not standard. And these are not standardized. So most of the time, the private entity would provide free tool or application or payment gateway, but will charge the citizen for like additional 60 to 100 pesos and so on. So we on a policy level, those are the things that we need to standardize because it's like a toll fee, right? So
Yeah.
we kind of have to standardize how much the convenience fee that these providers would um, would charge to the citizen paying certain fees to the LGUs. But I just wanted to tell everyone that we are in the discussion on that in terms of the PPP part. The GPPB will also be releasing guidelines on and resolution on the matter, because we have been receiving a lot of complaints with respect, or not really complaints, but more of concerns, no, with respect to certain PPP initiatives. But I just wanted of course, in PPP, the private sector would still have to get revenues, right? But on the LGU level, just make sure that you're not going to sell data of your citizens. Privacy is still intact and so on. So wearing also, I'm also a DPO together with Attorney Nino. So those are the considerations that we have to 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 look into when we're dealing with PPP.
Thank you for that, Yusek. We've got 5 minutes left. Maybe I'll just ask each um, panelist to just say a short statement of what they think would be the most impactful way, or what they think from their points of expertise about how government can really use technology in the most impactful way. Starting with you, Alvin.
Okay, sure. I think, like what I said earlier, that, data, it's the new oil, but I think we need to look at data from a different pair of lens. I think traditionally we think a lot about data as a bit of that, math, that statistical model. But as we begin to understand data better, data can be correlated. The intersection of different data points create new value that we have not seen. So I think, my encouragement to government, to all LGUs, is to be more savvy in the way you harness data. I know data is very limited and clean data, but be more savvy in understanding data and then understanding new signals that are enabling us as a government unit to potentially drive greater investment into your city, into your province, but leverage data to your advantage.
Yeah. So to me, probably three things, right? Every government leader here, mindset, three things in terms of three principles. Citizen first, digital first, and sustainability first. So citizen first, you've heard great example from the Quezon City government, right? Putting the citizen at the center, being able to improve the quality of life, interaction, collaboration, participation of the citizens in governance. So that's very important. Number two, digital first. And at the heart of any digital strategy is data. Data, being able to open it, hopefully promoting open data, sharing it more, and collaborating on it more, and of course putting the necessary safeguards to protect the citizens' data from misuse. Sustainability first. Yes, economic growth is very crucial, but it cannot be existing without environmental sustainability. So in cities, I would love to, let's say, for example, live in a city that is, it's green, don't see much waste around everywhere, right? So those are the three key things, I think.
Thank you.
So, three things also. One, ease of doing business. Two, cybersecurity. And three, upskilling the digital mindset of our civil service personnel. So we at PISAC, particularly the digital infrastructure sector, provide recommendations to Malacanang from a best practice point of view. So ease of doing business, we want to promote investment in digital infrastructure development. Cybersecurity, it's a major concern, particularly among critical infrastructure, information infrastructure, and that's one of the recommendations we are also pushing forward, which is there's a draft EO that we are pushing for critical infrastructures. Digital mindset, government also has to have that mindset. There has to be a level of know-how in terms of digitalization, and that's also PISAC's recommendation. We are working with the ICT and the Development Academy of the Philippines, along with the National University of Singapore, for a curriculum for our civil service personnel to upgrade or develop this mindset of digitalization for our civil service personnel.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, for me it's collaboration. So we collaborate with ADI. They're providing our dashboards for inflation monitoring, providing us a forward estimates as to how much budget we need to provide the next year. Microsoft, they're helping us with cybersecurity, with Power BI dashboards. PISAC with the policies and the EOs that we need to push forward to the President's attention. And Beacon, also USA, has been helping us with the enterprise architecture, cybersecurity, and everything on the IFMIS project. And this is I'm proud to say that it takes a village to do digitalization in the government, and I'm happy that I'm here with KPMG as well. I've been constantly talking with Director Manabat. He's like one of my mentors. He actually invited me to be in the ICD. So he's one of my mentors. So in terms of governance, so what needs to be done in a proper way and so on, Director Manap. So and basically that's it. I'm very thankful for this kind of collaboration, and I hope that the public would be able to benefit out of these partnerships.
Thank you.
Okay, and lastly, so just wanted to echo, it's ease of doing business. No? And technology is really an integral part of that. We saw the presentation of Quezon City. No? It really makes things convenient for everyone. No? One thing I wanted to emphasize is we're always thinking it's convenience for businesses, investors, and citizens. No, it's not only that. We keep on talking about financing. It's also good for the government itself. Actually, you're talking about where do we get funding for this? If you streamline, like what Quezon City did, actually all the savings that you can generate from that can actually finance your new investments. No? Think of all the human resources that you will save, transportation, paper, printing, etc., etc. That actually can finance your investments. So don't be scared. It's not just for your citizens, it's also for you, for governments, so for the national, local governments. What you can, if you streamline, if you really interoperate, make it one-stop shop, you can save a lot and you can plug those investments into your new investments.
Thank you very much for your insights. I provided you, and the panel has provided you a very compelling and urgent discussion. And I know we've only scratched the surface, but ladies, gentlemen, and lady, thank you very much for your participation. Please